Okay, so today you're going to do 6-3 parallelograms, and we're going to go ahead and talk about proving parallelograms theorems. These are all the different theorems. We've just condensed them into a small section. So you do need to remember this. These rules, these theorems, obviously you're going to use your notes. So make sure that you should still be reading over them, looking at them while you're doing your homework. The first one, if both pairs of opposite sides of a quadrilateral are parallel, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Remember, a quadrilateral, a quad means it has 4 sides, and a parallelogram means the sides of the quadrilateral are parallel to the opposite side. If an angle of a quadrilateral is supplementary to both its consecutive angles, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So all of these are telling us that the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Number 3, if both pairs of opposite angles of a quadrilateral are congruent, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Number 4, if the diagonals of a quadrilateral bisect each other, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. And number 5, if one pair of opposite sides of a quadrilateral is both congruent and parallel, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. So, in this box, the concept summary proving that a quadrilateral is a parallelogram. It is telling us the same thing that we have above the theorems. It's showing us pictures of them. They're not in the same order though, so you're going to kind of have to see. So let's go ahead and look at each one. The first one, I'll go ahead and highlight. Prove that both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. You can prove that by using the definition of parallelogram, and this is what it's talking about. So this went with the first one. If both pairs of opposite sides, so these are opposite sides, and then here, if they're parallel, then it is a parallelogram. The next one, prove that both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. You use theorem 6-8, which is showing that the opposite sides are congruent to each other. Oh, that one's not written up here. Talks about opposite angles, but oh, yeah. The next one, prove that an angle is supplementary to both of its consecutive angles. So that one is talking about this one here. The quadrilateral is supplementary to both its consecutive angles. Remember, consecutive means they're next to each other. So these two angles here are consecutive, they add to 180. And these two angles here are consecutive, so they also add to 180. And if that is true, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. If both pairs of opposite angles of a quadrilateral are congruent, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram, which is here, both pairs. So you have your opposite sides, your opposite angles are congruent, and it is a parallelogram. The next one, if the diagonals of a quadrilateral bisect each other, then they are congruent. And what is bisect? It means it cuts it in half. So these diagonals here bisect each other. It is a parallelogram. And if one pair of opposite sides of a quadrilateral is both congruent and parallel, then the quadrilateral is a parallelogram. Which goes this one, and here we have here. And so here's a picture. They're both congruent and they are parallel. Okay. So this is just something that you need to read over. You don't necessarily have to memorize it, but you have to be able to look at a picture and know what what it means. So, can you prove that the quadrilateral is a parallelogram based on the information? So here it's telling us this information goes with this figure here. And so what it's telling us is that FG is parallel to IH, and FI, oh, not congruent, sorry. Wrong symbol. Okay. It's telling us that FG is parallel to IH, and FI is parallel to GH. And so is that true? Let's go ahead and look up. Is that one of our theorems? Is that in this concept's theory? Yes, it's talking here. The first one, if both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. So this would be yes. And it says it's 3. You could go ahead and say it tells us which one, what we're using there, which is the definition of a parallelogram. Okay, so we could say the definition of a parallelogram. Alright, the next one, I abbreviate parallelogram using the two parallel sides. Alright, the next one, can we use this one? Yes or no? Yes, we can, using for 6-8. If we see here, prove that both opposite sides are congruent. Oh, what happened? Sorry about that. Okay. So we're proving, we would say yes, this is true. And we're using theorem 6-8. The next one is this one. Yes, both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. This is a yes. And we're using 6-10. Theorem 6-10. The next one. All of these sides are congruent. So if the opposite sides are congruent to each other, then this is a yes. Here, AE is congruent to EC, and BE is congruent to ED. This would be a yes because of the diagonal theorem, which is 6-11. So theorem 6-11. What was the first, that one before? Theorem 6-8. And the last one is a yes, because of this last one here. Prove if one pair of opposite sides is congruent parallel, then it is. So that would be 6-11, theorem 6-11. I mean 6-12, sorry. So that's all you're really doing for this section, is just telling us yes or no. If you can't figure out which theorem, that's fine, but if you look here at this one, then you should say yes or no, and if you say yes, you should be able to tell me why, using this information here, which theorem. So I would look at the picture in the problem, and then look at these pictures and try to match them. If none of them match, then it most likely is a no. Alright, so here's your assignment. This is 810, page 392. Numbers 2, 3, 8 through 11, and 19 through 21. Some of these may be equations problems where you have to use algebra to solve for x. So if you do, then go ahead and look at your notes, look at that box, look at the pictures, and it's going to tell you exactly how you should set it up. If it's talking about the diagonals, then they're going to be congruent to each other. The consecutive angles, if they're consecutive, then they're supposed to be supplementary. So you would add them together, make them equal 180. So make sure if you see problems where you have to solve for x, use the information that we just went over and set up your equation, and then go ahead and solve for it. Make sure you turn this in. You're getting some points for trying them all, and then some of them are going to be graded. Some of you are not passing the class. You're not turning your work in. And if you are turning your work in, you're not doing it all. You're just doing a few problems, and you're only getting a few points. So a lot of you do not have very good grades right now. Make sure that you start doing your work and turning it in so that you can pass the class. You guys have a nice day.